So this is a revision lesson on the work that you've done before on diseases, and this is the syllabus extract that relates to that work. So this is what the examiner will use to set the questions on this piece of work. So take a look at that. Pause the video there perhaps to take a look at that and then move on. So here's what we're trying to cover again for you, looking at what communicable and non-communicable diseases are and being able to give examples of those, and maybe looking at communicable diseases that can lead to non-communicable diseases, so infections that could then lead to something which you can't pass on. So, a little bit of a starter for you here, 3 things. The diagram on the right over here as a kind of an aid memoir to help you remember what health is and some of the factors that affect it. A reminder of the work we did 2 or 3 lessons ago on the heart issues and ways to treat them. And just being clear what exactly we mean by the term risk factor. There's a couple of examples there for you: smoking and fatty diet. So think about a definition for health and then restart the video and see what we've got. So over here we have the World Health Organization definition of health, a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And of course the question about the heart was all about coronary heart disease, blocking of the coronary arteries, causing a heart attack potentially, the use of stents, valve replacement, artificial hearts, pacemakers, and drugs, statins to help with all of that. The risk factor then is something that increases the risk of developing a certain disorder or disease. So if you're obese, for example, you're at risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Now, just while I think about it, if you have a Google Doc on which you're supposed to be making notes as you go through here, you can always pause the video to do that, but make sure you do answer those questions. So, definitions of communicable and non-communicable disease. If you think about communication as passing on information, communicable diseases are diseases which can be passed on between people, whereas non-communicable diseases cannot be passed on. So, cold, flu, COVID, coronavirus, these are communicable. Diseases like cancer, diabetes are not. So there you have your definitions of communicable and non-communicable diseases. So, think of, it doesn't have to be 15, but think of as many diseases as you can, up to 15, split them into 2 columns and put them into either communicable or non-communicable. So just take a moment or 2 to do that, just to get clear in your head which diseases you know which are communicable and which are non-communicable. You had a few examples earlier in this presentation. So, the body's defense against infection then, well, it's the immune system, of course, and the immunity that perhaps we acquire against diseases. And note the use of the word pathogen here. You need to know what a pathogen is. If you don't, look it up. Okay, so you have a question on your Google Doc. What is the immune system? What do we mean by immunity? So, Reminder here of what a vaccination is, or what a vaccine is, and how it works. We're coming on to that. So here we have some communicable diseases, some of which you'll come up with in your list: colds, flu. Mononucleosis, I don't imagine you came up with that, although maybe you know someone that has had it, and so you might have come up with it. Hepatitis is a disease of the liver. Tuberculosis, lungs, pneumonia, lungs, or and strep throat, streptococcal infection of the throat. These are all communicable, and you can see some are viral, some are bacterial. Cold and flu are both viral. And here we have some non-communicable diseases. You probably come up with cancer. You should have come up with heart disease, because we've talked about that. You might have come up with diabetes, arthritis, allergies, asthma. You can't catch an allergy from someone, although you can become allergic to something. So, a reminder then, communicable diseases can be passed on from person to person, non-communicable can't, and using the word community to try to help you remember that. So, we had a look at viral diseases, bacterial diseases, fungal diseases, and protist diseases. And we looked at a viral disease that affects people, measles and HIV being examples, and a viral disease that affects plants, tobacco mosaic virus. We looked at a fungal disease that affects plants, rose black spot, and a fungal disease that affects people, athlete's foot. A couple of bacterial diseases, and we only looked at one protist disease, malaria. So what I'm asking for here, and you've got some time to do it, a revision resource, a mind map, and you want to make your mind map with both words and pictures. That doubling up helps you to remember it better. You're looking for the symptoms, how they're spread, how they're treated or prevented. And you have over here some links to resources to help you do this. So pause, make your research or your revision resource mind map about 15 minutes, and then start the video again. So here we have a summary table. It's not a mind map, doesn't have any pictures in, so it's not as good as what you should have done. But a summary of the sort of information you should have in your mind map: the symptoms, how it's spread, how it's treated or prevented. This is a preventative measure. And so on. So check yours against this and make sure that you've got this information in there. Moving on then to how vaccinations work. It's important that you know this process, and you might choose to put this diagram into your notes. So pathogens are disease-causing organisms: virus, bacteria, fungus, protist. And pathogens have particular antigens. These are proteins on the outside of your pathogen. These antigens cause the immune system, specifically the white blood cells, remember the lymphocytes and phagocytes we talked about, the white blood cells, to produce complementary antibodies which target and attach to the antigen. So here's your antigen, here's your antibody, and they will kill the pathogen. Having developed these antibodies, when you come into contact with the pathogen again, your memory cells produce the same antibodies again, but more quickly than before, and so you don't get ill. And worth watching that video. And there's a diagrammatic representation then of the process. So here's a question for you to do. Explain how the vaccine makes someone immune to mumps. Note there are 5 marks for this. You need to plan your answer. So you've got about 5 minutes to do that. Should take you about 5 minutes. Then you can check your answer. So here we're explaining what we mean by these words. So when we say explain, you're going to describe and explain. What is a vaccine? Well, you'd want to remind yourself of what that is, because this question requires you to talk about that. What do we mean by immunity? What kind of disease are we talking about here? Well, it's a viral disease. So here are some key words that you would want to put in. Antigens, antibodies, white blood cells, specific, virus. So having done your answer, compare it to this. And here is the actual mark scheme for that question. Notice it is lymphocytes, the white blood cells. If we're going to be specific, it's lymphocytes that are doing this work, not the phagocytes. So white blood cells will be fine, but if you're going to be specific, you have to say lymphocytes. If you have time then, this question has the rest of this one. This is only part C of that question. So you can finish that if you have time.